Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. My nephew locked Pops out of the farmhouse he built with his own hands. They called him confused, forged his deed, and smiled while stealing his land. But high above the grain silo, one old camera was still watching everything. The first thing I noticed was not the padlock on the gate, it was the silence. Pop's farm was never silent. Even in February, when the fields were stiff with frost and the wind moved like a knife through the fence wire, that place had a voice. The old pump clicked, the barn boards groaned, the chickens scratched under the lintel like gossiping old women. Somewhere, always, Pops was humming through his teeth while he fixed something that had no right to still be working. But that morning, the farm sounded dead. I had driven 6 hours after my sister called and said, too sweetly, that Pops was getting confused again. She said he had wandered away from the house. She said my nephew Mason had found him standing near the road without a coat. She said the family had made a hard decision. The family, that was what she called herself whenever she wanted to make something ugly sound official. By the time I reached the farmhouse, Pops was sitting in my passenger seat with a grocery bag on his knees. Inside were 2 shirts, his shaving kit, his blood pressure pills, and a framed photo of my late mother wrapped in a dish towel. He kept one hand over the frame like someone might take it. I tried his key in the front door. It did not turn. Pops stared at the brass knob. His lips moved once, but no sound came out. He had built that porch with his own hands in 1978. He had replaced the roof after the hailstorm. He had buried 2 dogs under the maple tree. He had carried my mother through that doorway when her legs stopped working. Now his own key scraped uselessly inside a lock somebody else had installed. A new security sticker shone in the window, Harper Property Management. Harper was Mason's last name now because my sister had married into ambition and taught her son to worship paperwork. Mason was 31, with a smile like fresh paint over rot. He wore clean boots to the farm and took photos beside tractors he did not know how to start. He called Pops, the old man, when he thought no one important could hear. I called him from the porch. He answered on the second ring. "Uncle Eli," he said, cheerful as a salesman, "you made it." "Why is Pops locked out?" A small pause, not guilt, calculation. "Because the doctor said he shouldn't be alone." "No doctor told you to change the locks on his house." "The house isn't technically his anymore." Pops looked up at me then. His eyes were pale from age, but sharp enough to cut glass. "What did he say?" he whispered. I turned away so he would not see my face change. "He said there's paperwork." Mason sighed as if I were a child refusing medicine. "Come by the diner in town. Mom's there. We'll explain everything. Try not to make a scene in front of him. He's fragile." Fragile. That word did something to me. Pops had outlived 2 recessions, a tractor rollover, cancer, and 3 children who treated his patients like an inheritance advance. He was not fragile. He was tired. There is a difference. Behind me, Pops touched the door with his fingertips. Not knocking, not asking, just remembering. "I still got the blue key," he said. "That one opens the grain office," I told him. "No," his voice was barely a thread. "It opens what they forgot." I thought grief had tangled his words. I thought he meant some old cabinet, some rusted box of receipts, some farm habit only he understood. I did not know then that the blue key would lead us to the grain silo camera. I did not know Mason had not just locked Pops out of a house. He had locked himself inside a lie. Harper Diner used to be Miller's Diner before Mason bought the sign, painted it black, and raised the price of coffee. He called it modernization. Pops called it putting lipstick on a good horse and wondering why it won't plow. My sister Lydia sat in the back booth like a judge before sentencing. Her husband Grant was beside her, tapping on his phone, too bored to pretend concern. Mason stood near the counter in a wool coat that cost more than Pop's first tractor. He smiled when we walked in. The room was full of people who knew Pops, people who had bought eggs from him, people who had watched him bring casseroles to funerals and fix storm doors for widows without charging a dime. That was why Mason chose the diner. Public places make cowards feel safe. "Pops," Mason said loudly, opening his arms. "You scared us yesterday." Pops leaned on his cane. "Didn't scare myself." A few people chuckled. Mason's smile tightened. Lydia rose and came toward him with trembling hands, but her eyes were dry. "Daddy, we love you. We're only trying to protect you. From my own house." "From confusion," she said. I set the grocery bag on the floor. "Show me the paperwork." Grant finally looked up. "Eli, maybe calm down." "I am calm." "No," Mason said, pulling a folder from under his arm. "You're emotional, which is understandable. You've been out of state. You haven't been here for the appointments, the incidents, the financial strain." Financial strain? That was new. Pops owned the farm outright. The only debt on that land was sweat. Mason opened the folder and slid copies across the table. Durable power of attorney, farm management agreement, voluntary transfer of residence. The pages were stamped, notarized, and clean enough to look honest. Pop's signature appeared at the bottom of each one. Except it was not Pop's signature. I knew because I had watched Pop sign checks my whole life. He pressed hard enough to bruise the paper. His P leaned backward. His S looked like a bent fishhook. The signature in front of me floated lightly across the line like someone had copied it from a birthday card. "You forged this," I said. Every conversation in the diner died. Mason let the silence grow, then looked wounded. It was impressive, in the way a snake shedding skin is impressive. "That is a serious accusation." Lydia's voice cracked on cue. "Eli, please, Daddy signed those after the fall." "What fall?" "The one by the silo," she said too quickly. "He forgot." The doctor documented confusion. Pops gripped his cane. "I didn't fall by the silo." Mason knelt beside him. The performance shifted, gentle now. "Grandpa, it's okay. You don't have to remember everything. That's why you trusted me." Pops looked at him for a long moment. "I trusted you with the calf bottle when you were 11. You watered the milk because you were too lazy to carry the pail." Mason's face hardened for half a breath. Then the smile returned. "See," he told the diner softly, "he's mixing things together." That was how they did it, not with a shout, not with chains. They did it by turning every memory Pops had into evidence against him. An old woman near the register whispered, "Poor Henry." Poor Henry, not Pops. Not the man who had fed half the town through bad harvests. Just poor Henry, confused and inconvenient. I folded the copies and put them in my coat. Mason reached for them. "Those are family documents. They're evidence now." Grant stood. "You have no authority here." I looked at Pops. "Do you want to come with me?" His answer came immediately. "Yes." Lydia gasped, as if I had stolen him from a hospital bed. "Daddy, you don't know what you're saying." Pops lifted the blue key from his pocket and held it between two fingers. "I know exactly what I'm saying," he said, "and I know where your boy forgot to look." Mason saw the key. For the first time that day, he stopped smiling. The grain office sat behind the old silo, half hidden by sumac and leaning fence posts. Most people thought it was storage. Mason probably thought it was trash because nothing in there had an app, a glossy logo, or a way to impress strangers at a fundraiser. Pops insisted we go before sunset. I wanted to take him to my motel, get him warm, call an attorney, and start slowly. Pops shook his head the way he used to when I tried to skip steps on a fence repair. "Bad weather moves quick," he said. "Bad people move quicker." The farm road was frozen mud. My tires slid twice. Pops watched the fields through the windshield, one hand on the blue key, the other on my mother's framed photo. The land rolled dark and bare on both sides, 47 acres that had been in our family since before the county paved the main road. Mason wanted to call it an asset. Pops had called it work. My mother called it proof that love could be planted if you were stubborn enough to water it. At the grain office, the little padlock was so rusted it looked fossilized. Pops bent forward, breathing hard, and guided the blue key into it. It opened cleanly. Inside, dust lay thick as flour. There was an old metal desk, 2 filing cabinets, a wall calendar from 2019, and a smell of dry corn, mouse nests, and machine oil. Pops pointed to the far corner. Battery box. I found a gray steel cabinet behind a stack of cracked buckets. It had a keypad, but the faceplate hung loose. Pops told me to pull it off. Behind it was a second keyhole. You always build a back door? I asked. Only for men who smiled too much. The second lock opened with the same blue key. Inside the cabinet was a small monitor, a recorder unit, and a tangle of wires running up through the wall toward the silo. I stared at it. Pops, what is this? Camera. Why do you have a camera on the grain silo? He gave me a look. Because people steal diesel, Eli. The recorder light blinked green. Alive. I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because my body did not know where to put the relief. How far back does it record? Depends if Grant remembered to pay for clouds. Cloud storage. Your mother made me get it after the feed thefts. Said if I was too cheap for a lawyer, I ought to be rich enough for proof. I turned on the monitor. After a few seconds, a grainy black and white view appeared, the yard between the silo, barn, and side entrance to the farmhouse. The camera angle caught more than the silo. It caught the gravel drive, the back porch, the grain office door, and part of the kitchen window. Pops lowered himself into the chair. His hands shook now. He was brave, but bravery still pays rent to the body. What date was the fall? I asked. No fall, he said. I know. What date did they say? He closed his eyes. Tuesday, 2 weeks ago. I navigated the menu. Pops talked me through it in short phrases. The system was old but functional. Dates appeared in blocks. Most days were boring. Wind, crows, Pops carrying feed, a delivery truck. Mason arriving with coffee he would not drink because the farm kitchen wasn't photogenic. Then I found Tuesday. At 9:14 a.m., Pops walked across the yard normally and entered the barn. At 9:28, Mason arrived with Lydia and Grant. At 9:31, Grant looked directly at the silo camera. At 9:32, Mason threw a tarp over it. The screen went black. Pops exhaled. There. No, I said. That only proves they covered the camera. Keep going. At 10:47, the tarp slipped in the wind. The image returned crooked, showing only the side of the farmhouse and the kitchen window. But that was enough. Through the glass, inside the kitchen, Mason sat at Pop's table with documents spread in front of him. Lydia stood beside him, holding Pop's checkbook. Grant practiced a signature on a yellow legal pad. Then Mason lifted Pop's old fountain pen and signed the papers. Pops made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not shock, not sadness. It was the sound of a man watching his own blood sell him while he was still alive. We watched the footage 3 times. The first time I was looking for proof. The second time I was looking for details. The third time I was looking at Pops. He sat so still the dust could have mistaken him for furniture. His eyes did not leave the screen. When Mason bent over the table and copied his signature, Pops touched his own hand, like he could feel the theft happening in his bones. I taught him to write his name, he said. That sentence was worse than anger. On the monitor, Grant checked the forged signature against a photo on his phone. Lydia paced beside the refrigerator, chewing her thumbnail. At one point, she looked toward the hallway, scared Pops might walk in, though we later learned they had already driven him to a clinic for evaluation and left him in the waiting room with a nurse who thought he was just early. They had 1 hour. 1 hour was enough to steal a life if everyone agreed to call it paperwork. Mason stacked the forms, tapped them square on the table, and slid them into a folder. He looked pleased, not relieved, not guilty, pleased, like a man who had found a shortcut through someone else's grief. Then he said something we could not hear, because the camera had no audio. Pops leaned forward. Can you read lips? No. Your mother could. She also could scare a man into confessing without raising her voice. That made him smile for 1 second. Then it vanished. I copied the footage to a USB drive, then another. Then I uploaded it to my cloud account while standing in that freezing grain office with 1 bar of service and a prayer. Pops made me label the files in a notebook. Date, time, contents. He was a farmer. Evidence to him was just another harvest. You did not leave it in the field. As I worked, my phone filled with messages. From Lydia, please don't take Daddy anywhere. Mason says you're upsetting him. From Mason, you are interfering with a legal care arrangement. From Grant, last warning, return the documents. Then from a number I did not recognize. Mr. Harper asked us to confirm pickup of remaining household items tomorrow at 8 a.m. I showed Pops. His eyes narrowed. Remaining what? I called the number. A woman answered with the bright fatigue of someone working late. Clearpath Estate Liquidators. Estate, the word hit like a slap. I asked what pickup she meant. She hesitated, then said they were scheduled to remove farmhouse contents authorized by Mason Harper, acting property manager. Furniture, tools, kitchenware, antiques, personal effects. Personal effects. My mother's quilt. Pops wore medals. The cedar chest with baptism gowns. The cast iron pan seasoned by 3 generations of breakfasts. The little radio Pops kept by the sink because my mother liked baseball in the summer. They were not waiting for him to die. They were rehearsing it. I told the woman there was a legal dispute and nothing could be removed. She sounded relieved. People in those jobs learn the smell of family rot. When I hung up, Pop stood, too fast. He gripped the desk until the shaking passed. I need to go home. You can't. Mason changed the locks. Pops looked at the monitor, at the frozen image of his grandson forging his name. Then we don't go through the front door. I wanted to argue. He was 82, recently betrayed, and running on black coffee and spite. But I had learned as a boy that when Pops used that voice, the weather could wait, the bank could wait, even God might consider rescheduling. Behind the grain office was a storm cellar entrance half swallowed by weeds. Pops had built it after the tornado of '86. It connected to the old basement under the pantry. Nobody used it anymore because nobody wanted to crawl through spiders and wet stone. Nobody except a man locked out of his own life. We waited until full dark. Then Pops took the blue key, tucked my mother's photo under his coat and said, "Let's see what else they stole." The storm cellar door groaned like it had been waiting years to complain. I went first with my phone light. The steps were slick. The air below smelled of limestone, onions, and damp earth. Pops came behind me slowly, one hand on the rail, the other holding the grocery bag with my mother's framed photo. Every few steps, he paused to breathe. Every pause made me want to turn back. Every time I said his name, he answered, "Keep moving." The cellar opened into the old pantry through a narrow wooden hatch behind shelves of canning jars. My mother had hidden Christmas presents there when we were kids. I remembered crouching in the dark, trying not to laugh, while Lydia searched the house for a doll she swore Santa had forgotten. That memory stood beside me, now like a ghost, watching what Lydia had become. We lifted the hatch. The pantry was empty. Not messy, not packed, empty. My mother's jars were gone. Peach preserves, green beans, tomatoes, pickled beets, all the proof of her summers lined up in glass. The shelves were bare except for dust rings where jars had sat for years. Pops reached up and touched one circle. They took Ruth's peaches. I had been prepared for documents. I had been prepared for anger. I was not prepared for peaches to hurt. In the kitchen, the damage spread. The oak table was still there, but the chairs were gone. The clock above the sink had been removed, leaving a pale square on the wall. My mother's recipe box was missing. The refrigerator was covered with estate sale stickers. Blue sticker, keep. Orange sticker, sell. Red sticker, discard. Pop stood in the center of the room while the house judged us with those little colored dots. A red sticker sat on my mother's sewing basket. Pops peeled it off and put it in his pocket as if it were evidence of a crime, because it was. In the living room, boxes were stacked by the door. I opened one and found framed photos wrapped in newspaper. My graduation, Lydia's wedding, Mason as a baby in Pop's lap, fist buried in birthday cake. Grant had written Misc Decor on the box. Misc Decor. I took a picture of every box, every sticker, every missing space. Pops walked slowly room to room. He did not cry. That frightened me more than tears would have. Grief needs a way out. If it stays too quiet, it becomes something with teeth. Upstairs, his bedroom had been stripped to basics. The quilt was gone. His dresser drawers were open. The safe in the closet had been dragged forward and scratched around the keypad. "Did they get in?" I asked. Pops shook his head. "Your mother set the code." "What is it?" The day Lydia apologized without being told. Despite everything, I almost laughed. So never. Exactly. We found the recipe box in the trash bag by the hallway. At first, I thought it was just more carelessness. Then I saw why they had thrown it away. Inside, taped beneath the index cards, was a small envelope. Pop stared at it. "Ruth." The envelope was addressed in my mother's handwriting. "Henry, if they start deciding before asking." Inside was a note, a bank deposit receipt, and a photograph of Mason at 16 standing beside the silo camera box, grinning with a screwdriver in his hand. On the back, my mother had written, "He knows it's there. Don't let him claim he forgot." The deposit receipt was for the camera system's first cloud subscription, paid from my mother's account, renewal automatic. My mother had been dead 4 years, and she was still better at protecting Pops than his living family was at loving him. Downstairs, headlights washed across the kitchen wall. A car pulled into the yard. Pops gripped my arm. "Mason." We killed our lights and stood in the dark kitchen while the front door opened. Mason walked in with Lydia behind him, talking low and fast. "I told you he took the copies," Lydia said. Mason's voice was cold. "Then we move faster. Tomorrow morning the house is empty. By Friday, the farm is listed. By next week, Grandpa signs the facility agreement or I sign for him." Grant entered last, carrying bolt cutters. Lydia whispered, "What if Daddy fights it?" Mason laughed. "Then we tell everyone Uncle Eli manipulated a confused old man for money." Beside me, Pop stopped breathing. I raised my phone and pressed record. They did not know we were in the pantry. That was the only reason we heard the rehearsal. Mason spread papers across the kitchen table, the same table where Pops had taught us to count change, shuck corn, and tell the truth even when it cost more than lying. Lydia stood by the sink hugging herself. Grant opened drawers, not searching with panic, but with ownership, as if the house had already agreed to belong to him. "We need consistency," Mason said. "If Eli pushes this, we stay on message." Lydia sounded small. "I don't like saying Daddy hit you." My blood went cold. Mason clicked his tongue. "He didn't hit me, he became aggressive. There's a difference." "You said bruises." "I have old ones from the gym." Pops leaned against the pantry wall. His face had gone gray. Grant laughed softly. "Use the cane story. Old guy swings cane, everyone believes it." "Stop," Lydia said. Mason turned on her. The softness vanished. "No, you stop. You wanted this handled. You cried about Dad leaving everything to the farm trust. You said it wasn't fair Eli got executor rights because he actually showed up. You said you deserved security. I didn't say forge his name. You said do whatever it takes." There it was. Not all guilt looks the same. Mason looked proud. Grant looked hungry. Lydia looked like someone who had ordered a fire and now wanted sympathy for the smoke. Mason slid a sheet toward her. "Read it." "No." "Read it, Mom." She picked up the paper with shaking hands. "My father has shown signs of cognitive decline for months," she read. "He has become paranoid, especially toward my brother Eli, who has encouraged him to distrust family members. On the advice of professionals, we relocated him for his safety." Grant interrupted. "Say facility, not relocated. Sounds cleaner." Lydia started again. Pops closed his eyes. I wanted to step out then. I wanted to throw open the pantry door and let rage do the talking. But the phone in my hand was recording, and evidence is quieter than rage, but lasts longer. Mason took the paper back. "Good, cry more when you say it." Lydia slapped him. The sound cracked through the kitchen. For one pure second, I thought my sister had returned to herself. Then she whispered, "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. I know how to cry." Mason smiled. "That's my mother." That was when Pops moved. Not loudly, not dramatically, He simply stepped out of the pantry and into the kitchen light. The three of them froze. Pops looked smaller without his farm around him, standing in slippers and an old coat, holding a grocery bag full of what they had allowed him to keep. But his voice was steady. "Practicing my funeral while I'm still breathing." Lydia made a broken sound. "Daddy, don't," he raised one hand. "I heard enough." Mason recovered first. "Grandpa, you shouldn't be here. This is exactly what we're worried about." "In my kitchen. You broke in." Pops looked at the pantry hatch. "I built in." Grant lifted the bolt cutters. "Eli, you need to leave." I stepped out beside Pops, phone still raised. "Say that again while I'm recording." Grant lowered the cutters. Mason's eyes flicked to the phone, then to the kitchen window, then toward the hall. He was calculating exits. That, more than anything, told me he knew the lie had a pulse, and it was weakening. "You're making a mistake," he said. "No," Pop said. "I made a mistake when I thought blood meant character." Lydia started crying then, real tears or better acting. "Daddy, I was scared." Mason said the farm taxes, the care costs. "The farm taxes are paid," Pop said. "The care costs are none of your business because I never asked you to care." Mason's jaw tightened. "You are not competent to manage this property." Pop smiled, and it was not kind. "Maybe not," he said, "but the silo is." Mason went still. The camera, the one he had covered, the one he had forgotten could keep recording through weather, cloud, and my mother's stubborn subscription, stood between us like a witness waiting to be sworn in. Mason whispered, "What did you see?" I held up the phone. "Enough." We left before Mason could find his courage again. Pops wanted to sleep in the farmhouse. I refused, not because he did not have the right, but because rights do not stop desperate people from doing stupid things after midnight. We took the recipe box, the blue key, the USB drives, the copied documents, and my mother's photo. Pops also took the red sticker from the sewing basket, folded into his wallet like a curse. At the motel, he sat on the bed without removing his coat. I called the only lawyer I trusted, Marlene Price, a woman my mother once described as 5 feet tall and made entirely of court orders. She had handled my divorce years earlier and scared my ex-wife's attorney into politeness. When I explained the situation, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not send me summaries, send me files." That was Marlene, no soothing, no outrage, just aim. I emailed everything, forged documents, diner copies, camera footage, pantry recording, photos of the estate sale stickers, screenshots of messages, the estate liquidator's contact info. The motel Wi-Fi crawled. Pops watched the progress bar like a man watching a crop survive hail. Marlene called back at 1:12 a.m. "Eli," she said, "this is ugly." "I know." "No, I mean legally ugly. Potential forgery, elder financial exploitation, fraudulent transfer, unlawful eviction, possible conspiracy. The care arrangement depends on whether any medical authority actually evaluated him." Pops leaned toward the phone. "I can hear you." "Good," Marlene said. "Mr. Miller, you understand where you are." "Motel 6, off Route 8. Room smells like onions and bleach." "Do you understand why?" "Because my grandson forged my name, and my daughter helped." A pause. "Do you want Eli making decisions for you?" Pops looked at me. His expression softened for the first time all day. "I want Eli helping me make my own." "That distinction matters," Marlene said. "Can you come to my office at 8? Pops said yes, before I could worry about the drive. After the call, he opened the recipe box. The smell of old index cards filled the room, cinnamon, paper, my mother's handwriting. He took out a card for apple butter and rubbed his thumb over the corner. "She knew," he said. "Mom." Ruth knew Lydia was weak around money. Knew Mason was worse. "Why didn't she say something?" "She did. I called it being harsh. There are regrets that arrive like storms and regrets that arrive like dust." This one settled over him slowly. I sat beside him. "You loved them. Love ain't supposed to make you stupid. It makes everyone stupid sometimes." He gave me a tired look. "That's your divorce talking." "Probably." He almost smiled. At 3:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. A video message from Mason. I opened it, on mute first. He stood outside the motel office under yellow light, face tight, hair windblown. He was close, too close. The text underneath read, "You don't understand what you're doing. Grandpa will lose everything if you fight me." I showed Pops. He did not look afraid. That worried me. "Play it," he said. Mason's voice filled the room, low and controlled. "Uncle Eli, this has gone too far. Grandpa needs stability, not your drama. If you keep pushing, the county will get involved. They'll see he's confused. They'll see you're influencing him. And when that happens, he won't go home. He'll go somewhere you don't get to choose." Pops listened to the end. Then he picked up my phone and recorded a reply. "Mason," he said, voice calm, "you covered the wrong camera." He sent it before I could stop him. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then nothing. Pops handed back the phone and lay down on top of the covers, coat still on. "Now he won't sleep either," he said. "It was petty. It was perfect." And for the first time since I found him locked out of his own house, Pops closed his eyes with something like peace. Marlene's office smelled like coffee, toner, and controlled violence. She met us at the door in a navy suit, silver hair pinned so tightly it looked tactical. She shook Pop's hand, not mine first, and that small respect straightened him more than my helping arm ever could. "Mr. Miller," she said, "today we stop the blading." On her conference table sat 3 stacks, documents to file, documents to challenge, documents to weaponize later. Marlene had been awake most of the night. Her paralegal, a young man named Devon, looked like he had personally gone to war with a copier and lost. First came the emergency petition to block any property transfer. Then, a notice to the county recorder disputing the deed. Then a demand letter to Mason, Lydia, and Grant ordering preservation of records, devices, messages, emails, medical forms, bank transactions, and estate sale communications. Marlene smiled when she got to that part. "People like your nephew delight things," she said. "Then judges get curious." Pops signed his real name on an affidavit, heavy pressure, backward P fishhook S. Marlene compared it to the forged signatures. "They didn't even do a good job." "That's what hurts," Pops muttered. "If you're going to betray a man, show craft." Devon choked on his coffee. By 10, we were at the county office. Mason was already there. He stood near the recorder's counter with Lydia and Grant, speaking to a clerk in a tone people use when they mistake volume for authority. When he saw us, his face changed once quickly, then smoothed. "Grandpa," he said, spreading concern over the word like butter on burnt toast. "You shouldn't be here." Pops leaned on his cane. "You keep saying that in places I own." Marlene stepped forward. "Marlene Price, counsel for Henry Miller." Mason blinked. "Counsel." "Yes, a thing competent adults may hire." The clerk looked relieved enough to cry. Grant tried to interject. "We have filed documentation." "Forged documentation," Marlene said, placing a folder on the counter. Lydia whispered, "Mason." Mason lowered his voice. "This is a family matter." "No," Marlene said. "It became a public record matter when you attempted to transfer real property using signatures we can challenge. Under circumstances we can describe. With video, we can authenticate." The word video landed beautifully. Mason looked at me. "You really want to destroy this family?" I thought of Pop's empty pantry, my mother's recipe box in a trash bag, the red sticker on her sewing basket, the rehearsal in the kitchen. "No," I said, "I think you already did." Marlene filed the emergency documents. The clerk stamped them with a satisfying thud. Sale halted, transfer flagged, deed under dispute, no new recording without review. Mason's phone rang. He looked at it and declined. It rang again. Then Grant's phone rang. Then Lydia's. Clearpath Estate liquidators probably, or the buyer. Or someone expecting clean theft and discovering mud. Pops watched Mason with an expression I could not read. Not triumph, not forgiveness, something older. "You could have asked for help," he said. Mason gave a short laugh. "Help? You mean a lecture? You and your precious farm, your precious rules. You were going to leave everything tied up so none of us could use it. So you stole it." I saved it from rotting. You couldn't keep a basil plant alive in college. A clerk snorted and turned it into a cough. Mason stepped closer. Marlene moved half an inch, which somehow felt like a wall rising. I am warning you, Mason said softly to Pops. If you keep humiliating me, I will make sure everyone knows how bad your mind really is. Pops looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Good." Mason frowned. Pops lifted his cane and pointed toward the security camera in the county office corner. "Tell them here." Mason's mouth closed. That was the first time I understood. Pops did not want private victory. Private victory lets liars rewrite the room after you leave. He wanted witnesses. The medical lie broke faster than the property lie. Mason had built his whole argument on one claim. A doctor said Pops was not safe alone. That sounded official. It sounded compassionate. It made neighbors nod and relatives soften. People trust white coats even when no white coat is in the room. Marlene did not trust anything that could not be subpoenaed. By noon, we were at Willow Creek Clinic, where Mason claimed the evaluation happened. Pops remembered being left in the waiting room, then taken into an exam room by a nurse who checked his blood pressure and asked if he had fallen. He said no. She asked if he felt dizzy. He said only around fools. The nurse laughed and gave him crackers. That was the entire appointment. The receptionist recognized Pops immediately. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, "you left your cap here." From behind the desk, she produced his brown cap with the feed store logo. Pops took it like a returned passport. Marlene requested records. The receptionist hesitated until Marlene produced authorization signed by Pops himself. Real signature, heavy ink. The file arrived in 10 minutes. No cognitive diagnosis, no recommendation for residential care, no report of aggression, no fall by the silo. There was one note from the nurse practitioner. Patient appears oriented, frustrated by family conflict. Recommends follow-up with primary physician if concerns continue. Patient denies fall, no visible injury. Marlene made a copy and underlined oriented. So hard I worried the paper would sue. Then she asked for the intake form. That was where Lydia's handwriting appeared. Reason for visit: family concerns about confusion, possible fall, unsafe behavior. Under reported by, she had written Mason Harper. Pops read it twice. He wasn't even in the room. "No," Marlene said, but he was building a record. Outside the clinic, Lydia waited by her car. She looked older than she had in the diner. Betrayal ages the betrayed. Exposure ages the betrayer. Her mascara had run. For a second, I saw my sister as a child again, standing in the barn crying because she had stepped on a nail, Pops carrying her while my mother told her to breathe. "Daddy," she said, "can we talk without lawyers?" Marlene answered, "No." Lydia flinched. Pops said nothing. She clasped her hands. "Mason pushed this too far." I almost laughed. "Pushed? I didn't know about the signature. You practiced telling people Pops was violent." Her face crumpled. I panicked. Pops finally spoke. "About what?" "Everything." Lydia's voice rose. "Grant lost money. The diner investment failed. Mason said the farm could save us, but you had all those restrictions, all that trust language. You made it impossible. I made it hard to steal. You made it hard to live. That one hit Pops. I saw it." Lydia saw it too and moved closer. "Daddy, I am your daughter. I made mistakes, but I was scared. You know Mason, once he gets an idea." "No," Pop said. One word, not loud, but final. Lydia stopped. "You don't get to hide behind your son," he said. "You raised him sharp and called it smart. You fed him my table and let him mock the hands that cooked. You heard him call me confused before I forgot a thing. You liked it because it made wanting easier." She cried harder. "I love you." Pops looked at the cap in his hands. "I believe you think so." That was worse than if he had called her a liar. My sister turned to me then. "Eli, please, he listens to you." "He listens to himself," I said. "You just stopped hearing him." Marlene guided Pops toward my truck. Behind us, Lydia called out, "If you do this, I lose my home." Pops paused. For a moment, the old father inside him turned around. I saw it. the reflex to rescue her, the disease of decent parents, believing grown children become innocent again when they cry. Then he put on his cap. "No," he said without looking back, "you lose mine." We drove away while she stood in the clinic parking lot, smaller than her excuses. The buyer's name was Oliver Crane. He owned storage units, laundromats, and 3 failed wellness centers that somehow became tax advantages. His office occupied the 2nd floor above a bank, with frosted glass doors and a receptionist who looked trained to smile through bankruptcy. Marlene brought us there because the disputed sale documents listed Crane Holdings as the planned buyer of 12 acres near the road, including the farmhouse, barn, and silo access. Mason had not just wanted control. He had wanted to carve the farm into pieces before Pops could blink. Oliver Crane greeted us in a gray suit and moral flexibility. "Mr. Miller," he said to Pops, hand extended, "I was under the impression you approved the transition." Pops did not shake his hand. "You were under the impression my grandson was honest. Happens to fools." Crane's smile thinned. Marlene placed a folder on his conference table. "We are here to notify you that any pending purchase is contaminated by fraud. Proceeding after notice may expose you to additional claims." Crane sat slowly. "I purchased in good faith." "You have not purchased anything yet," she said. "You signed a preliminary agreement based on disputed authority. There is a difference." He opened the folder. His eyes moved over the forged signatures, the clinic record, the county dispute notice, and finally still frames from the silo camera showing Mason at the kitchen table. His jaw tightened. "I was told Mr. Miller was incapacitated." Pops snorted. "I was told margarine tasted like butter." "People lie." I watched Crane closely. Some men are shocked when they find fraud. Others are annoyed by documentation. Crane looked annoyed. Marlene saw it too. "Did Mason Harper provide any medical certification?" His attorney referenced family concerns. "Which attorney?" Crane hesitated. "A good lie is quick. A bad truth takes a second." Mason said legal review was pending. "So no attorney." I had no reason to doubt him. Pops leaned forward. "Did you have reason to hurry?" Crane's gaze flicked to him. There it was. Mason had not invented greed out of nothing. He had found someone willing to pay less if the family was desperate enough. Crane probably knew the farm was worth more whole than split, and much more if rezoned. Mason knew enough to smell money, not enough to understand men like Crane eat boys like him for breakfast. Marlene tapped the preliminary agreement. "The offered price is insulting." Crane folded his hands. "Properties with family complications carry risk." "Fraud carries prison," Pop said. No one spoke for a moment. Then Crane did something interesting. He turned his computer monitor toward us and opened his email. "I will provide communications voluntarily on the condition that you acknowledge my cooperation." Marlene smiled. "We acknowledge nothing until we see them." He printed emails. Mason had written them with the confidence of a man who believed age was the same as erasure. "Grandpa is deteriorating fast. Need close before Uncle Eli gets involved. Once transfer papers record, we can clear contents. Facility placement next week." Another email. "Mom is emotional but on board. Grant will handle cleanout. Lock change scheduled." And one line that made Pops close his eyes. "After this, the old man won't have anywhere else to go." Crane slid the pages across the table. "I don't want criminal exposure." "Then withdraw," Marlene said. He did, in writing, while we watched. On the way out, Pop stopped beside the receptionist's desk. There was a bowl of peppermints. He took one, unwrapped it slowly, and put it in his mouth. "You all right?" I asked. "No." "Fair enough." "In the elevator," he said, "Mason wrote that like I was furniture. He wanted you cornered." Pops looked at his reflection in the brass doors. For the first time since this began, he looked old to me. Not weak, just weathered beyond what one body should carry. "When your mother was dying," he said, "she made me promise not to let the farm turn us mean. She knew. She knew land can do that. Money too. Makes people talk about legacy when they mean appetite." The elevator opened. Marlene's phone rang before we reached the lobby. She listened, then looked at us. "Sheriff's deputy is at the farm," she said. "Mason reported a break-in and elder kidnapping." Pop sighed. Boy always did choose the dumbest gate. Deputy Carl Donnelly had known Pops for 30 years. That helped. It did not solve everything. We met him at the sheriff's department instead of the farm, because Marlene said the first person to choose the room often chooses the story. Donnelly was a broad man with tired eyes and a mustache that looked older than some deputies. He shook Pop's hand and called him Henry, not Mr. Miller, not victim, not confused. Mason arrived 10 minutes later with Lydia and Grant. He wore a navy blazer and fear disguised as outrage. "There he is," Mason said, pointing at me. "He removed my grandfather from a safe environment and broke into the farmhouse." Donnelly looked at Pops. "Henry, were you taken anywhere against your will?" Pops adjusted his cap. "I've been taken lots of places against my will. School, church, once to a line dancing class Ruth lied about, not this week." Donnelly's mouth twitched. Mason raised his voice. "He's making jokes because he doesn't understand the seriousness." Marlene set a recorder on the table. "We are recording this conversation." Grant said, "You can't do that." Donnelly said, "Actually, she can." That was the first crack. Mason tried the medical angle. Marlene handed over the clinic note. Mason tried the legal authority angle. Marlene handed over the county dispute. Mason tried the safety angle. I handed over photos of the estate sale stickers and the empty pantry. Then came the video. Donnelly watched the silo footage on Marlene's laptop. His expression did not change much. Good deputies learn not to react before the end. But when the tarp covered the camera, he leaned in. When the image returned and showed Mason at the kitchen table, signing, his jaw moved once. Mason spoke before the clip ended. "That is not what it looks like." Pop said, "Then tell us what a man signing another man's name looks like." "I was assisting with paperwork he had already approved." "Why was Grant practicing my signature?" Grant coughed. "That was unrelated." Marlene played the pantry recording next. The room listened to Mason coach Lydia to cry more, listened to the Kane story, listened to Grant suggest everyone would believe an old man swung first, listened to Mason say if Pops fought, they would tell everyone I manipulated him. By the end, Lydia had covered her face. Mason stared at the table. Donnelly turned off the audio. "I need everyone to understand something. This is no longer a simple family dispute." Mason's head snapped up. "You're taking his side." "I'm taking evidence seriously." "My grandfather is confused." Pops leaned forward. "Mason, what did I give you for your 15th birthday?" Mason blinked. What? What did I give you? This is ridiculous." "Answer." Mason looked around. The room waited. "A watch," he said. Pops nodded. "What happened to it?" Mason's face reddened. "I lost it. You pawned it for concert tickets and told your mother a farmhand stole it. I paid the farmhand anyway because he had 3 kids and no reason to carry your shame." The silence was total. Pops looked at Donnelly. "My memory ain't the problem. Their comfort with lying is." Donnelly closed his notebook. He did not arrest anyone that minute. Real life is cruel that way. It does not always give you handcuffs when the audience is ready, but he opened a formal report. He requested copies. He told Mason not to return to the farmhouse, not to remove property, not to contact estate services, and not to interfere with Pops. Mason stood so fast his chair scraped. "You'll regret this," he said to me. Donnelly's voice hardened. "Mr. Harper." Mason stopped. That sounded like a threat. Mason smiled, but his eyes were wrong. "It's concern." Pop stood slowly. "No," he said. "Concern brings soup. That there is just fear wearing a tie." Outside, Lydia tried to follow us. Marlene blocked her with one sentence. "Communicate through counsel." My sister looked at me as if I had built the wall myself. Maybe I had. Maybe it needed building years ago. Small towns do not keep secrets, they season them. By the next morning, everyone knew something had happened at the sheriff's department, but nobody knew enough to be accurate. The hardware store version had me kidnapping Pops for farm money. The church version had Lydia saving him from neglect. The diner version changed every hour depending on who tipped the waitress. Mason used that. He posted first. A long, polished statement appeared on Facebook under a photo of him and Pops from 5 years earlier. In it, Mason described the painful process of protecting an aging loved one, outside interference, misunderstood legal planning, and the tragedy of elder manipulation. He asked for privacy, prayers, and respect. People gave him all three in the comments. Poor Mason. So hard when families fight. Your grandfather is blessed to have you. I read them in Marlene's office and felt my pulse climb. Pops read them too. His face stayed still until he reached one comment from a woman whose porch he had repaired after her husband died. Henry always seemed stubborn. Maybe this is for the best. He put the phone down. I fixed her porch in the rain. I know. She paid me in zucchini bread. I know. He nodded once, as if filing the betrayal under weather. Marlene advised silence. Do not fight on social media. We fight in records. Pops looked at her. Records don't talk to neighbors. No, she said, but neighbors can be subpoenaed. That cheered him slightly. The problem was not just gossip. Mason's post put pressure on the buyer, the bank, and Lydia's friends. He was not trying to win court yet. He was trying to poison the well before anyone drank from it. Then he posted a photo of Pop's grocery bag. Someone had taken it at the diner, zoomed in on the shaving kit and pill bottles. Caption: This is what confusion looks like. Please stop exploiting him. I saw red. Pops saw something else. He used my pills. There was such quiet humiliation in his voice that I wanted to drive to Mason's house and become a cautionary tale. Instead, Marlene made tea and said, "Now we respond. Not with anger, with evidence." She drafted a short statement, approved by Pops, posted from my account because he refused to make one. Henry Miller is safe, represented by counsel, and fully capable of speaking for himself. Legal documents concerning his farm are under formal dispute. A law enforcement report has been opened. We will not litigate family matters online, but we ask people not to spread claims about his medical condition that are not supported by his doctors. Then Pops added one sentence. I am old, not absent. That sentence did what the rest could not. It traveled. People who had ignored legal words shared those 5 words. I am old, not absent. The woman with the porch deleted her comment and messaged an apology. The feed store owner called to ask if Pops needed hay delivered. The pastor, who had said nothing when gossip was useful, suddenly wanted to mediate. Pops said no. By evening, Mason posted again, this time sharper. He accused me of turning Pops against the people who stayed. He said I had been gone for years. That part was true enough to hurt. I had visited, sent money, called Sundays, but Lydia lived closer. Proximity can look like virtue from a distance, even when it is just geography. Pops watched me read the post. You're thinking he has a point. I wasn't here enough. No, Pops said, you weren't, but you didn't steal the roof because you missed the rain. That was forgiveness, Miller style, no sugar, but enough to keep a man alive. At 9:40 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown account. Check the church basement freezer. Attached was a photo of a cardboard box labeled Ruth Pantry. Inside were my mother's jars. Peaches, green beans, tomatoes. Someone had taken them from the farmhouse and hidden them at the church for the estate sale charity breakfast Lydia was organizing on Saturday. The flyer appeared 10 minutes later, supporting Henry Miller's Care Fund. I showed Pops. His hand closed around the phone until I worried it would crack. They're selling Ruth's peaches, he said. Marlene took one look at his face and said, all right. I looked at her, all right what? She opened her laptop. If they want a public event, she said, we can work with that. The church basement smelled like pancakes, coffee, and moral cowardice. Lydia had decorated the folding tables with blue ribbons and little printed cards that said help Henry come home to safe care. Mason stood near a donation jar, accepting sympathy like tips. Grant managed a clipboard where people signed up for volunteer shifts that did not exist. Against the back wall were boxes of my mother's jars with handmade price tags. Ruth Miller's farm pantry, preserves, suggested donation, $12. Pop stopped at the doorway. For a moment, I thought the sight would break him. Instead, he straightened his cap, took his cane in his left hand, and walked in. The basement quieted in waves. Lydia saw him and rushed over. "Daddy, you shouldn't have come." Pops looked at the jars. "Apparently, I was invited by my peaches." Mason moved in quickly, voice low. "Grandpa, this is not the place." Pop smiled. "That's what thieves say about rooms with witnesses." People heard that. "Good." Marlene arrived behind us, with Devon carrying a projector case. Deputy Donnelly came too, officially to keep the peace, unofficially because he had known my mother and did not appreciate preserves being used as props in fraud. The pastor fluttered over, sweating. "Perhaps we can all step into my office." "No," Pop said. "Basement's fine." Mason's eyes narrowed at the projector. "What is this?" Marlene answered loudly enough for the nearest tables. "Since this event is collecting money based on claims about Mr. Miller's care and property, he will make a brief statement." Lydia whispered, "Please don't." Pops looked at her. "You sold your mother's peaches under my sickness. Don't please me now." That landed harder than shouting. Marlene connected the projector to her laptop. A white sheet used for vacation Bible school became a screen. On it appeared the clinic note, "Patient appears oriented. Denies fall. No recommendation for residential placement." Whispers. Then the county dispute notice. More whispers. Then still frames from the kitchen. Mason signing, Grant practicing, Lydia holding the checkbook. Mason lunged toward the table. Donnelly stepped in front of him. "Don't," the deputy said. The footage played. No audio at first. Just the grainy view through the kitchen window, the tarp slipping, Mason bending over the table with Pop's pen. People leaned forward. The room forgot its pancakes. Then Marlene played the pantry recording. Mason's own voice filled the church basement. "Read it. Cry more when you say it." Lydia sat down like her knees had been cut. Grant backed toward the stairs. Pop stood beside the donation jar and watched the town watch the truth. His face was not victorious. It was exhausted. Truth is heavy even when it belongs to you. When the recording ended, silence held for a long, perfect second. Then Mrs. Calder, who had bought 2 jars of peaches, picked them up and walked to Pops. "These are yours," she said. He nodded. They were Ruth's. She placed them gently on the table beside him. One by one, people brought the jars back. Peaches, beans, tomatoes, pickled beets. My mother's summer returned to her husband under fluorescent lights. Mason tried to speak. "This is edited." Devon, sweet exhausted Devon, projected the metadata, date stamps, file hashes, backup logs. Marlene smiled. "It's preserved." Grant reached the stairs. Donnelly said, "Mr. Harper, stay where you are." "Wrong, Harper," but Grant obeyed. Lydia finally found her voice. "I didn't know he would forge it." Pops turned to her. "You knew he would hurt me." She covered her mouth. He walked to the front of the basement, slow but steady. "I don't want your donations. I don't want your pity. If you gave money today, take it back. If you bought Ruth's jars, leave them here. If you repeated that I was confused because it made a clean story, do better next time." Someone started crying. It wasn't Lydia. Mason stared at Pops with pure hatred now. The mask was gone, and in some awful way that was a relief. A monster in daylight is easier to fight than a saint in shadow. Pops lifted the donation jar. It was heavy with cash. He handed it to Deputy Donnelly. "Evidence?" he asked. Donnelly took it. Evidence. That was the moment Mason finally understood. This was not family drama anymore. This was a case. After the church basement, Lydia disappeared. Grant hired a lawyer who told him to stop speaking, which was the first wise decision that man had ever paid for. Mason kept posting, but the posts became shorter, angrier, and less shared. People enjoy righteous sons until the projector comes out. Pops, however, grew quieter. Public truth had protected him, but it had also stripped him. Everyone now knew his pantry was empty, his daughter had lied, his grandson had forged, and his neighbors had been willing to believe he was gone before he left. Justice can save a man and still make him feel naked. On Monday, he asked to go to the bank. Not the branch Mason used, the old brick one downtown where the manager still wore suspenders and remembered when Pops delivered eggs through the back door. Pops had a safe deposit box there. I had never heard of it. My father told me, he said, never keep all your proof where hungry people eat. The box required 2 keys. Pops had one taped beneath the lid of my mother's recipe box. The bank had the other. When the drawer slid out, Pops rested both hands on it before opening. Inside were envelopes, savings bonds, my mother's wedding ring, a cassette tape, a USB drive newer than everything else, and a sealed letter addressed to me. I looked at Pops. He looked away. Ruth wrote it. My name in my mother's handwriting had the power to turn me 12 years old. I opened it in the private room. Eli, if you're reading this with your father, then things are worse than he admitted. That was my mother. Even dead, she began with accuracy. She wrote that she had worried about Lydia's debt, Mason's entitlement, Grant's gambling, and my distance. She did not flatter me. She said I loved Pops, but I had let being the reasonable one become an excuse to avoid conflict. She said Pops would forgive too long because he confused endurance with mercy. Then came the line that stopped me. The farm trust names you successor not because you are the best son, but because you are the one who can say no and survive being hated. I read it twice. Pops watched me. She was hard on you. She was right. The USB drive contained scanned trust documents, older medical evaluations showing Pops competent when the trust was updated, photos of valuables in the house, serial numbers for equipment, and a video file. We played it on Marlene's laptop later. My mother appeared on screen in the farmhouse kitchen, thinner from illness, but still wearing her red cardigan. Pops sat beside her, pretending not to cry. If you're seeing this, she said, Henry let somebody make a mess. Pops muttered, woman. In the video, she explained the trust. The farm could not be sold while Pops lived unless he personally approved it in front of 2 independent witnesses and a physician-confirmed capacity on the same day. The farmhouse contents were cataloged. The pantry goods were not legally important, she admitted, but morally, anyone who steals peaches from an old man deserves public embarrassment. I laughed and cried at the same time. Then she looked straight into the camera. Mason, if this is you, shame on you. Lydia, if you helped him, shame on me for not teaching you better. Grant, I never liked you. Even Marlene smiled. The final part was for Pops. Henry, love is not letting them take your chair and thanking them for leaving you the floor. Come home, lock the door, let Eli help. Pops covered his face with both hands. No one spoke. Some grief is too sacred for witnesses, even friendly ones. When he lowered his hands, something had shifted in him, not healed, never that simple, but settled. What now? I asked. Marlene closed the laptop. Now, she said, we file the trust documents, freeze every attempted transaction, and ask the court for emergency relief. Pops nodded. And after that, I asked. He looked at the paused image of my mother on the screen. After that, he said, I go home. Returning to the farmhouse took 4 vehicles, 1 locksmith, 1 deputy, 1 lawyer, and half the town pretending not to watch. Mason's lock came off in 10 minutes. Pops insisted on keeping it. I want it mounted, he said. Mounted, I asked. In the mudroom, label it, what betrayal costs at wholesale. Marlene told him not to antagonize the court. Pops told her he would use tasteful font. Inside, the house still felt wounded. Empty spaces glowed on the walls. Boxes waited by the door like attempted escapes. But the kitchen table remained, and the first thing Pops did was place my mother's framed photo back on it. Then the jars. One by one, we returned them to the pantry. Mrs. Calder had organized neighbors to bring them from the church. People arrived in embarrassed clusters, each carrying preserves like offerings. Most apologized too much. Pops accepted the jars, not always the apology. When the feed store owner brought the last crate, he said, "Henry, I should have known better." Pops looked at him. "Yes." The man nodded. "I did bring peach pie." Pops took the pie. "That helps less than you hope." But he let him in. By afternoon, the kitchen smelled like coffee and dust. The locksmith changed every exterior lock. Marlene posted a notice on the front door, "Property subject to court order. Unauthorized entry prohibited." Donnelly photographed every room for the report. We found more damage. The tractor title was missing. 2 antique rifles were gone. My mother's jewelry box had been opened, though the wedding ring was safe at the bank. The safe keypad was scratched. The attic had been searched. Every discovery tightened something in Pops until he moved through the house like a man inventorying wounds. Then we reached the mudroom. On the peg where the farm keys belonged, Mason had hung a laminated note. "For Grandpa's safety, no unsupervised access." Pops read it. He took it down. He did not tear it. He did not crumple it. He carried it to the kitchen, placed it beside the forged documents, and said, "Evidence." That word became his shield. At sunset, I found him on the back porch facing the silo. The sky had gone copper over the fields. The grain office window caught the last light. Somewhere beyond the barn, a crow shouted like it had legal objections. "You okay?" I asked. "No." He handed me a mug. We stood in honest silence. After a while he said, "When Mason was little, he'd follow me out here, boots on wrong feet, always asking why corn grows taller than beans, why cows stare, why your mother could make me behave with one eyebrow." What happened? Pops sipped his coffee. He learned answers could be sold. That was the saddest description of growing up I had ever heard. My phone rang. Marlene. The emergency order had been granted. Mason, Lydia, and Grant were barred from entering the farm, contacting estate services, recording property documents, accessing Pop's accounts, or representing themselves as agents for him. A hearing was set. The sheriff's department had opened investigation into financial exploitation and forgery. When I told Pops, he nodded once. Then he took Mason's lock from the porch table and hung it on a nail by the mudroom door. Under it, he taped the laminated note. No label yet, just the lock and the lie beside it. That night, Pops slept in his own bed. I slept on the couch with a baseball bat I had not told Marlene about. Around 2 a.m., I heard him moving downstairs. I found him in the pantry, touching the jars like counting children after a storm. "You need help?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just making sure what came home knows it's home." I did not know what to say to that, so I stood with him until the old house stopped feeling empty. Courtrooms make family betrayal look smaller than it feels. Everything that had torn through Pop's life became exhibit numbers, sworn statements, and polite objections. The farmhouse became the residence. My mother's peaches became personal property removed without authorization. Mason's smile became demeanor. Pop's became the protected party, which he hated less than confused elderly male, but more than Henry. Judge Whitcomb was not sentimental. That helped. Mason arrived with an attorney who looked expensive enough to resent being there. Lydia came separately, face pale, hair pulled back, no Grant in sight. Grant's attorney appeared by video, which suited him. Even pixelated, he looked like a man hiding behind bandwidth. Mason's lawyer argued that the family had acted out of concern. He said the documents reflected Pop's previously expressed wishes. He said the video was ambiguous. He said elder care decisions were emotional and often misunderstood by distant relatives. Distant relatives. I felt that one in my ribs. Marlene stood slowly. She did not argue emotion. She built a house of facts and invited the judge to live in it. Clinic note, no incapacity. Forgery comparison, obvious discrepancies. Silo footage, Mason signing documents. Pantry recording, family planning false claims. County filing, disputed transfer. Crane emails, urgency before my involvement. Estate liquidator messages, contents scheduled for removal while Pops was alive and objecting. Trust video, clear instructions. By the end, Mason's attorney had stopped saying ambiguous. Judge Whitcomb asked Pops if he wanted to speak. Pops stood. He had worn his good brown jacket and the tie my mother bought him for funerals, which felt appropriate. Your Honor, he said, I am not against help. I am against being erased and charged for the service. The court reporter's fingers moved fast. Pops continued. My daughter and grandson said I was confused because it made stealing sound kind. They said safety when they meant control. They said family when they meant mine. I want my house, my farm, my records, and my name back. Mason stared at the table. The judge asked, do you fear retaliation? Pops looked at Mason, then Lydia. I fear stupidity, he said. Retaliation is one of its hobbies. Judge Whitcomb's mouth twitched, but only once. The order came down hard. Temporary injunction continued. All attempted transfers frozen. Independent forensic review of signatures. Financial records to be produced. No contact except through attorneys. Mason removed from any claimed management role. Lydia barred from accessing Pop's accounts. Grant ordered to disclose communications regarding the estate liquidator and buyer. Then came the sentence that made Mason finally show his teeth. The matter will be referred for criminal review. His chair scraped. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Mason whispered something to him. The attorney whispered back sharply. Lawyers use different words, but the meaning was clear. Sit down before you ruin yourself faster. Outside the courtroom, Lydia waited by the elevator. Daddy, she said. Pops kept walking. Daddy, please. Mason lied to me too. That stopped him. He turned. He lied with your permission. She shook her head. I was scared of losing everything. You chose to lose me first. She flinched as if struck. Mason came out behind her. His face was red, control cracking at the edges. This isn't over. Marlene stepped in front of Pops. Actually, that phrase is usually said by people currently losing. He ignored her and looked at me. You think you're the hero, you abandoned them for years and came back just in time to play savior. There was enough truth in that to sting. Pops answered before I could. Eli came when called. You came when there was equity. Mason's hatred shifted to him. For 1 second, I saw what he would become if no judge, deputy, camera, or shame stood in his way. Then the elevator opened and Pops walked in. We left Mason standing outside as the doors closed. It was not the end, but it was the first door he could not unlock. Mason waited 3 days before doing something stupid. I wish I could say he surprised me. He did not. Men like Mason can tolerate consequences only if they believe consequences are negotiations. When the judge made the order clear, he started looking for a side door. At 11:36 p.m., the farm alarm pinged my phone. Motion, grain office. Pops was asleep upstairs. I had finally convinced him to take the pain pill his doctor prescribed for his hip, and for the first time in days, his face looked unguarded. I did not wake him. I called Donnelly, then grabbed the flashlight and the baseball bat I still had not told Marlene about. The night was cold enough to make breath visible. Frost silvered the grass. The barn loomed black against the stars. At the grain office, a shadow moved near the door. Mason, I called. The shadow froze. Then he stepped into the flashlight beam. He looked terrible, not humbled. Humiliation can teach. He looked cornered. His hair was greasy, his coat unbuttoned, his face pale with anger that had spent too long indoors. You shouldn't be here, I said. He laughed once. Everyone keeps saying that to everyone. What do you want? The original drive. Copies exist. Then the recorder. Also copied. The camera system. Cloud storage. His face twisted. You think you're smart. No, I think you're predictable. He moved closer. I lifted the bat, not high, just enough. He stopped. For a moment, the farm was silent, except for wind in the dry corn stubble. You ruined my life, he said. I almost answered. Then I remembered Pops in the church basement, letting silence make liars uncomfortable. So I waited. Mason filled it. Do you know what Crane is doing? He's saying I misrepresented authority. My lender pulled out. Mom won't answer me. Grant says he's cooperating. My lawyer wants a retainer I don't have, all because you couldn't stay gone. There it is. What? The closest you'll ever get to an apology. His eyes shone. Grandpa was going to waste it, all of it. Land sitting there, equipment rotting, house full of dead woman's junk. I stepped forward before I knew I had moved. He saw the bat and smiled. Do it, hit me, prove what I said. That was his plan. Not good but desperate. Get injured, claim aggression. Muddy the water. So I lowered the bat and turned my flashlight toward the silo. The tiny red light of the camera blinked. Mason followed my gaze. His face emptied. Behind him, headlights swept the road. Deputy Donnelly's cruiser rolled into the yard without siren. Another car followed. Marlene, because apparently she did not sleep, she merely paused between court filings. Mason whispered, "You called them." "No," I said, "the farm did." Donnelly ordered him away from the door. Mason began talking fast. He was checking on Grandpa. He saw suspicious movement. He feared evidence tampering. He had rights. He had concerns. Then Marlene held up her phone. The grain office camera had captured all of it with audio this time. Pops apparently had upgraded the system after the first theft years ago and forgotten to mention the microphone, or remembered and enjoyed timing. Mason sank slowly onto the step. That was how Pops found us when he came outside in his robe and boots, furious that no one had woken him for his own break-in. He looked at Mason, sitting between Donnelly and the grain office door. For a second, grandfather and grandson faced each other across the frost. Mason's voice broke. "Grandpa, please." Pop's expression did not change. "I asked you once," he said, "when you were 11, remember the calf bottle?" Mason's eyes flickered. "You watered the milk," Pop said. "Calf nearly died. I asked why. You cried and said carrying the pail made your arms hurt. I told you then, if a thing is too heavy, ask for help. Don't poison what depends on you." Mason looked down. "You got bigger," Pop said. "Milk stayed watered." Donnelly took Mason away. Pops watched the cruiser leave. Then he looked at me. "You brought a bat." I braced for judgment. He nodded toward the porch. "Your mother would have said use the shovel, longer reach." And with that, somehow, the night let us breathe. Lydia came to the farm alone on a rainy Thursday. She did not drive up to the house. She parked by the mailbox and walked the long gravel lane in a coat too thin for the weather. Maybe she wanted to look humble. Maybe she knew Pops would not appreciate tires on his wet drive. Maybe guilt had finally taught her one practical thing. Marlene had said no contact. Pops called her and said, "My daughter is in my road." Marlene sighed so hard I heard it through the phone. "Do not discuss legal matters without me." Pops looked out the window. Lydia stood in the rain, hair plastered to her face. "What about daughter matters?" "Those are usually worse," Marlene said. "Put me on speaker." Lydia reached the porch soaked and shivering. She held a plastic folder under her coat. Pops opened the door but did not invite her in. That was punishment enough to make her cry. "Daddy," she said, "I brought what I have." Marlene's voice came from my phone on the table. "State your name for the record." Lydia flinched. "Seriously?" Pop said, "Seriously." She swallowed. "Lydia Harper. And you understand this conversation is being recorded?" Marlene asked. "Yes." Only then did Pops step aside. In the kitchen, Lydia sat where she had once practiced lying. Rainwater dripped from her sleeves. She placed the folder on the table and pushed it toward Pops, not me. Inside were bank statements, text messages, copies of emails, and a handwritten timeline. Mason had started planning 6 months earlier. Grant owed money after a failed investment. Lydia had taken out loans against her house. Mason convinced her the farm trust was selfish and that Pop's assets should be mobilized before medical costs consumed them. He told her I would sell the farm anyway once Pops died. He told her Grant knew a buyer. He told her no one would get hurt because Pops would be comfortable somewhere clean. "Did you believe him?" I asked. Lydia looked at Pops. "I wanted to." That was the most honest thing she had said. She admitted she signed clinic intake forms, exaggerating confusion. She admitted she gave Mason access to Pop's checkbook. She admitted she helped remove pantry items and pack the house. She claimed she did not know Mason forged the signatures until after. Marlene asked, "When did you know?" Lydia closed her eyes. "The diner. When Eli said it, I looked at the paper and knew." "And you defended it anyway?" "Yes." Pops looked out the rain-streaked window. "Why come now?" he asked. She twisted her wedding ring. Grant left. No one spoke. "He said I dragged him into this. He's cooperating with prosecutors. Mason won't answer my calls unless he needs money. I have no house if the lender calls the note. I have no husband worth keeping. And I have," she looked around the kitchen, "I have what I did." Pop's face remained still. "So you came because consequences got lonely." She deserved that. She knew it. "Yes," she whispered. The rain tapped the windows. Somewhere in the pantry, a jar lid settled with a tiny pop. Lydia reached into her purse and took out a small cardboard box. "My mother's clock." The kitchen clock that had left a pale square on the wall. Lydia placed it on the table like a confession. "I kept it," she said. "I told myself I was saving it from the sale, but I liked having something of Mom's that no one knew about." Pops picked up the clock. His thumb moved over the chipped edge. Then he stood, took a nail from the drawer, and hung it back in its pale square on the wall. It started ticking immediately. The sound filled the kitchen. Lydia covered her mouth and cried. Pops did not comfort her, but he did let the clock stay. Marlene said Lydia's confession might help legally, but it would not erase what she had done. Pops said rain helps a field, but it doesn't unrot a fence post. Still, Lydia's documents mattered. Grant's cooperation mattered. Crane's emails mattered. Mason's midnight break-in mattered most of all, because judges do not enjoy being disobeyed by men who already look guilty on camera. Charges came slowly, then all at once. Forgery, attempted exploitation, fraudulent conveyance, criminal trespass, conspiracy under review. The town reacted like towns do, first shocked, then certain they had suspected it all along. Mason's old post disappeared. In its place, silence. Lydia posted nothing. Grant's lawyer advised him into invisibility. The pastor called Pops 3 times before Pops answered and said, "If you want forgiveness, preach about gossip first." The next Sunday, he did. We did not attend. Instead, Pops asked me to drive him to the feed store. He bought nails, hinge oil, and 2 bags of chicken feed, though he had no chickens anymore. "Habit," he said. "Hope," I thought. When we came home, cars lined the road. For one terrible second, I thought reporters had found him, but it was neighbors. Mrs. Calder, the feed store owner, the receptionist from the clinic, 2 church ladies, one of whom had returned 4 jars and apologized with banana bread. Even Deputy Donnelly stood near his cruiser, pretending he was there for traffic. On the porch was a new sign. "Welcome home, Henry." Pop stopped walking. I waited for anger. He hated fuss. He hated being pitied. He hated public emotion unless it involved baseball. Mrs. Calder stepped forward. "We know you didn't ask for this. We just wanted to say we should have stood closer." Pop stared at the sign, then at the people. "You should have," he said. The honesty landed awkwardly. Then he added, "Coffee's inside. Bring your own guilt cup." People laughed because he let them. That afternoon, the farmhouse filled carefully. No one touched what they shouldn't. No one said, "Poor Henry." They drank coffee, fixed the porch rail, rehung a cabinet door, stacked firewood, and returned small things they had bought from Lydia's care fund table without knowing better. A pie plate, a quilt rack, a box of my mother's sewing patterns. Each object came back with an apology. Pops accepted some, deferred others. Forgiveness, I learned, was not a single door. It was a field gate with a stubborn latch. Near sunset, Lydia arrived. The porch went quiet. She stood at the bottom step holding a folded paper. Her face looked raw but not theatrical. Pops did not invite her up. He did not send her away either. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "My name is Lydia Harper," she began. "I lied about my father's health. I helped remove property from his home. I allowed my son to use my fear and debt as excuses to harm him. I repeated claims I knew were not true. I let people believe he was confused, because that made my guilt easier to carry. Her voice broke. Pops listened from the porch chair. I'm not asking for forgiveness today, she continued. I am correcting the lie in the same town where I helped spread it. My father is not absent. He is not incapable. He is not a burden. He is the man whose work fed us, housed us, and gave us more mercy than we deserved. The yard was silent. Lydia lowered the paper. I'm sorry, Daddy. Pops looked at her for a long time. Then he said, I believe that you are. It was not forgiveness, but it was not nothing. Lydia nodded like she understood the difference. After everyone left, I found Pops in the mudroom. He had finally labeled Mason's lock. Not what betrayal costs at wholesale. He had written, ask for help before you poison what DP and DS on you. Under it hung the lock, heavy and useless. A monument to a door that no longer worked. Spring came late that year. The first warm day found Pops on the back porch with a notebook, a thermos, and the expression of a man negotiating with the future. The court process was not over. Cases moved like old tractors, loud, slow, and likely to stall in mud. Mason's attorney was fighting. Lydia was cooperating. Grant was saving himself with the energy he had never spent saving anyone else. The farms, however, had already made its ruling. It belonged to Pops. The emergency order became a longer order. The forged deed was voided. The attempted sale collapsed. Crane Holdings withdrew permanently and sent a letter so polished it practically apologized without admitting literacy. Estate Services returned what they still had. The missing tractor title appeared in Grant's storage unit. The rifles were recovered from a pawn shop 2 counties over. Mason pled not guilty. Pop said that was his right. Then he added, rights don't make lies taller. Lydia moved into a rented room behind the library. She came twice a week to help with chores, always after texting Marlene first, always leaving before supper unless Pop said stay. Sometimes he did. Usually he did not. Trust, once broken, did not return because someone swept the kitchen. But I watched him show her where the hinge oil was. I watched her listen. That was something. As for me, I stayed. At first I told myself it was temporary. Then I fixed the barn door. Then I reopened the grain office. Then I found myself arguing with seed catalogs and realizing temporary had changed its clothes. One evening, Pops handed me the blue key. I don't want it, I said. Didn't ask. He put it on the table. The key looked ordinary, scratched, dull, small enough to lose. It had opened the grain office, the camera cabinet, the part of the truth Mason had forgotten existed. But it had also opened something worse, the knowledge that family can stand in your kitchen and practice your erasure. I should have come more, I said. Pops nodded, no easy absolution. Yes, I will now. He nodded again, good. That was our whole reconciliation. Men in our family built fences, not speeches. A month later, we held a small dinner at the farmhouse, not a celebration. Pops refused that word. You don't celebrate surviving a fire, he said. You check the wiring. Mrs. Calder brought pie. Donnelly brought coffee. Marlene brought documents for Pops to sign and claimed she came for dessert. Lydia came with a casserole and stood awkwardly until Pops pointed to the counter. Put it there, he said. She did. After dinner, Pops asked me to set up the projector in the living room. For one frightened second, I thought he meant more evidence, but he handed me a different USB drive. Home videos. My mother in the garden. Pops younger, laughing as a goat tried to eat his shirt. Lydia at 16 pretending not to smile. Mason as a little boy chasing chickens in boots too big for him. Me, awkward and serious, holding a hammer wrong while Pops corrected my grip. No one spoke much. On screen, my mother turned toward the camera and said, Henry, stop filming and help. Pops answered from somewhere behind the lens, I'm documenting history. In the living room, old Pops whispered, I was. Lydia cried quietly, not for effect, not to change the room, just because memory had finally found a soft place to land. When the videos ended, Pops stood and looked at us. This farm remembers more than what they tried to do, he said. So will I. He did not look at Mason's empty chair. There wasn't one. That was another kind of verdict. Months later, people still asked how we found the proof. They liked the story of the silo camera, the blue key, the cloud storage my mother had insisted on paying for. They liked the old man outsmarting the grandson. They liked justice with a clean edge. But that was not the whole truth. The farm did not save Pops because of a camera. It saved him because he had spent his life leaving evidence of who he was, in repaired porches, in fed neighbors, in jars returned from shame, in a son's memory of a signature, in a wife's note taped beneath recipe cards, in every stubborn habit of a man who believed work should outlast appetite. Mason tried to forge a name. He forgot names are heavier than ink. That night after everyone left, Pops and I sat on the porch. The silo camera blinked red in the distance. The new locks clicked behind us. The pantry shelves were full. The kitchen clock ticked. Pops looked across the dark fields and said, "Tomorrow we fix the north fence. Tomorrow. Unless Betrayal fixed that too." I laughed. He smiled into the dark. And for the first time in a long time, the farm sounded alive again.